Thank you so much, Max, for that little bridge. So my name is indeed Jan-Hein. I've been working for 5 years at FeedbackFruits, and part of my job is being a product owner. Today I'm going to tell something about automated feedback powered by artificial intelligence. So how I want to organize this is the following way. I have a short presentation with our why, how, and what. And subsequently, I will present it in a Canvas learning management environment from a student, from a teacher perspective. So how to configure basically a way for students to receive automated feedback, and also from the student perspective, what if you get this feedback? So let me share my screen. Just one, share. There we go. Just a quick check, Max, do you see my slides?
Yes, all good.
Perfect. Okay, so automated feedback is first of all built in co-creation with 2 universities in Rotterdam, the University of Applied Science and Erasmus University. And the why of this project is the following thing. It was already mentioned in the comment by some people. Giving feedback is very valuable for the student learning experience. However, it takes time, especially once your classes get larger. So basically, when you look at that learning experience of a student, we've differentiated 3 types of feedback that students can receive and also reflect upon. First of all, of course, there's the professor or teacher feedback from the expert. Second of all, we've now discussed peer feedback, where there are sometimes some doubts also to convince faculty, but I'll come back to that later. But at least you make sure that there's more feedback that students can reflect on, so the picture of your learning experience becomes even clearer. And today I also highlight the automated feedback, which adds up to the amount of feedback that students can basically reflect upon and go through. So that was the big why. And if you look at those 3 types of feedback, it's basically the personal attention for your students. We also saw that proportionally, the teacher feedback makes up a small volume. However, that is really the high-level expert feedback related to, for example, problem solving, while peer feedback is more of a medium volume, and the majority in the end can come from this automated feedback, which I also dive into a little bit deeper later in the slides. Wrapping up the why, the goal of this project to create an AI together with universities to give automated feedback to students was really to increase the written work of students, so far the quality of the work, and at the same time, by giving them feedback real time, you can also improve their academic writing skills. They have a very rapid feedback cycle, and they can quickly iterate their work. At the same time, because a lot of feedback has already been processed by the students, teachers give less repetitive feedback. It would also save a lot of time, valuable time that can be used to give more expert type of feedback, high level feedback. Then the how. So how did we build this? Well, first of all, we worked evidence informed. So via our connections in education, we found a really nice meta study conducted on what are the criteria on how you can assess the quality of written works of students. And we quickly saw that a few of those criteria can actually be automated to give feedback on. A second step in this process in the how was that we asked those universities to give a benefit score to those. So basically we came up with a priority. University said a few of those criteria are very important for the learning experience to give feedback as soon as possible. So we had a prioritization there based on the research. And in the end, we saw that the type of feedback that this automated feedback tool would give is really more on the lower order skill sides of the Bloom side of the Bloom's taxonomy. So think about grammatical tense, reference styling, the layout of a paper, those kind of feedback elements. And by automating this, you basically unburden the teacher. They don't have to constantly give feedback on a wrong APA styling and referencing. And they can use this time for more higher order skills feedback. So this slide also shows that we do not replace the teacher. The teacher is still very important in the whole process of giving feedback to students. However, he can use his time more valuable. And it's also quite difficult to automate those higher order skills, such as critical thinking or problem solving. Last part of the how is, I think there are quite some valid concerns of how to use artificial intelligence in education if it's not implemented correctly. So immediately from the start, we took the EU guidelines for trustworthy AI and we embraced those while co-creating this tool. Now, coming to I think the most interesting part. So what we built so far in this innovation project, and just as a heads up, we have a first version. It's still in beta, but it's already being used by a lot of teachers. So what will be automatically checked at this moment in time? Well, we have first of all built a plugin. It's really a tool, such as the group memory evaluation tool and the feedback tool. And it can integrate in most LMS systems, and it can really give inline feedback. So not only generic feedback, but also very specifically inline. I'll show that later from the demo perspective. Now, what type of checks did we then automate from that meta study, from that big rubric? We're going to go also through a few examples later, but in big lines, the criteria are around the structure of papers of students, the use of language, the layout, the references, and tables and figures that are being used in the work. What is the future of artificial intelligence, and how can we give even more advanced feedback? Well, as I already said, the current feedback that is being automated is more on the lower end, the lower order skills. What we're moving with the possibilities, we're moving more and more towards the higher order skills. So an example here in this slide would, for example, say organizing of the paper. A student is organizing his paper, but if he introduces a lot of new information in the conclusion, we can actually detect that. These are new types of word they introduce. I haven't seen it in the rest of the paper, so we can give them feedback for that. What you can also think of, I saw a great question in the chat in the beginning about how do you convince faculty to organize peer feedback. I'm not sure, but I do believe that, I'm not sure in all aspects, but I do believe that one of the aspects is that faculty does not always, especially in business schools, believe in the quality of the feedback. How do you assure the quality? Students who go to business school pay a lot of money, maybe want to have good feedback from experts, not necessarily from their peers. That might be an argument of them. But if you can give automated feedback on feedback, so students who provide feedback, you can give them feedback on, hey, this feedback does not seem to be actionable. You did not apply a sandwich method. The feedback is not related to the part in line, etc., etc. So this is also an application of how you could eventually use AI to improve the quality of even feedback comments of students. But let's now make it a bit more concrete to show you what is actually working in this moment in time. So I'm going to go to the demo now, and I'll start from a teacher perspective. Just a quick check, Max. Do you see Canvas? Just to be sure.
Yes, good to go.
Thanks, great. So we're looking here from a teacher perspective at the Canvas environment. It's literally to create another moment for students where they can process feedback on their drafts, thesis, or case studies. It's literally 3 clicks. So you add this new tool. There's a way to add external tools in the learning management system, and we have listed the tool there. And then in the assignment, the tool is listed if you give it a title. So I call it Webinar Automated Feedback. If I dive into that actual activity, I have 2 steps I need to configure. First of all, the instruction. So in this context, I said, students, please upload your case study draft to receive some additional feedback on your current status. And then there's a hand-in step. And I can also, as a teacher, see who has handed this in. If I want to create that automated feedback, I need to go to the edit mode. I go to the second step where students hand in, and I start configuring the type of feedback I want my students to receive. I'll go into depth later, but you can see the same main criteria. So automated feedback related to the content, language, layout, and references. This is where you configure the type of feedback that students will receive when they hand in. So far for the teacher perspective, a lot will become more clear now that I switch to the student perspective. I just changed from the tab, so we're now looking at the student perspective. And if I now go to this webinar automated feedback activity, click on it as a student, I see the instruction of my teacher indicated by the teacher icon. I'm going to go in full screen for a second. That's a bit more nice on the eye. There we go. I've already uploaded an example, but I will now live add another file that will be automatically read by this AI, which is, of course, the second version, because my first version is already handed in. Let's say, hypothetically, I already took the feedback into account and came up with a second version before the deadline. That is now being processed, it's being uploaded, and it's being read by our automated reader. Now that we look at our first paper and show more, this is what a student would see. it's all about framing. So first of all, we indicate this is feedback to help you. It's a tool to help you improve the quality of your work. And of course, as it is an AI, the feedback may not always be perfect. So you have an option to object. This makes it feel a lot more safe for students. It's not an automatic grade. No, it's additional feedback to improve your work. And also, you have an option to object if the algorithm makes mistakes, which is also another benefit because it is a self-learning algorithm. What do you see here then? Well, a few of the elements that should be part of this paper are missing. In terms of required sections, for example, I should have an introduction and a conclusion in the work, which was not found by the algorithm on the level of titles. Also, it appears, and this is pretty nifty if you ask me, that students who introduce abbreviations, at the first time they introduce it, they should write it in full. However, for RCT, that was not the case. So if you go to show comments, I will now go to my work, and in line, this is where the algorithm found RCT. But before that paragraph, it was not yet introduced at full. And I can, as a student, also check all the other comments if they are in line. For example, it seems that this was a medical example. One of the references should be in Vancouver. If I go to the comments, this is not the right format for Vancouver. So what we can do here is we can either say it needs to be APA style, or there are several styles where you can choose from, or you simply just choose consistent, and then it's up for the student to choose a styling as long as it is consistent. So this is how students process the feedback. Well, this gave the automated reader some time to read my second version. And if I show more, I can now see, hey, cool, I do have the introduction right now and the conclusion in my improved work. The only thing I forgot is apparently you need at least 5 sources that you reference to, and I only have 2. This gives you a bit of an idea of how students can get additional feedback in addition to the peer feedback and the expert feedback by an automated reader. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Jan-Hein. We already got one question that we would like to give to you.
And there's a question on the experience of students and faculty who have used the tool so far in your pilots. If you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, great question. So again, in the beginning, it was funny when we did not carefully look at the framing. It felt more as an automatic grading. And also there were, besides all the objections, students were less happy with the help of this tool. Because, hey, you claim that I don't have something in this work, well, I'll do. When we changed the framing into this is a tool that helps you and it's compliments and suggestions, and also you can object, we saw a significant rise of grades from the student perspective. From the teacher perspective, well, at least in my 5 years, I've never seen so much interest in this tool because it's a great time saver, of course, for those low barrier feedback elements. The only thing that I hear a lot from teachers is that they say, I would like to have an interface where I can also see patterns of what type of checks are being performed very well by student groups or students, and where do they get a lot of suggestions at this point. So there's no interface for that yet, but we're planning to build that in the near future. And hopefully that will make sure that the ratings of teachers will also even go up further.
Thanks for that, Jan-Hein. We actually got another question which doesn't per se directly relate back to the automated feedback tool, but I think you are the biggest expert of the FeedbackFruits team here, so I guess you can answer it. It's from John. If inline feedback is also an option for non-AI feedback tools, for example, peer feedback, or is it rubrics only?
Yeah. So if I understand the question correctly. Could you have peer feedback, and in addition to that, also some additional automated feedback inline? That would be possible.
I think it's more. So what the automated feedback tool very nicely highlighted was basically the piece inline of the work, and that it said like that was basically inline feedback. John, I think that John refers back to, is that also the case within peer feedback, so that students can highlight within the work?
Yeah, well, that's the case indeed. If students can inline give very specific feedback, research showed that specific feedback is more valuable. So students can not only use criteria and qualitative comments to give feedback, but also inline of the work say where exactly. That counts for videos if it's about a certain fragment, but it also counts for written pages if it's at a certain page or paragraph. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Jan-Hein. Do we have time for one more?
I think we can bring up Ewout also.
Yeah, but before we do that, so we're running towards the end of this webinar. I would really like to thank all the panelists, all the presenters for sharing their experience and elaborating for all the attendees here. Before you all go, I would like to ask you to take a short 2 minutes to answer basically the survey that we have prepared. I think my colleague Irmak will drop the link to that survey. It will just take you a short 2 minutes, and it makes sure that basically future webinars that we're organizing can be basically improved from what we showed to you today. And with that being said, again, I would like to thank you for your attendance. I hope you had it was informative. If you would like to know more on FeedbackFruits, you can always schedule a meeting with one of us. We can help you further explain or even set you up for testing or piloting. We will definitely follow up with everyone on the recordings and also other material that might be of benefit to you.